The College of Global Futures is a new college that encompasses the School of Sustainability and the School for the Future of Innovation and Society, as well as the School for the Complex Adaptive Systems. So if you're looking at graduate degrees, that program is currently an amazing program to be looking at as well. I am your host for this session. I graduated from the School of Sustainability, which is part of College of Global Futures, and teach some of the study abroad programs. When we look at how sustainability is a part of our post-COVID-19 world and the innovations that we're going to need moving forward, we have an amazing guest speaker to talk to us about this. Dr. David Manuel-Navarrete is an associate professor with the School of Sustainability. He has an amazing biography. He first started as a consultant for the Sustainable Development and Human Settlements Division for the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean in 2004. And in 2007, he joined King's College in London as a research associate in the Department of Geography. And later on in 2010, he was a visiting researcher for the Free University of Berlin. He is one of our most popular professors, and you'll see by this presentation how he moves us forward to introduce some new perspectives of how we'll be dealing with COVID as we move forward. So I encourage you on the call to go into the chat box and ask any questions. And I know that Professor Manuel-Navarrete would be happy if you just want to unmute and ask some questions. He's very much a discussion and dialogue style instructor, so I'm sure he would welcome those opportunities. So if you would like to go ahead, sir, and take it away, it's my pleasure to have you get started.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Brigitte, for the generous presentation. And I guess I can ask you to flip the slides, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. So here you have the content of this short presentation. I will be brief because, as Brigitte was saying, I really would like to get feedback from you and get questions and discuss the topics that are most interesting for you. But in this brief presentation, I will introduce sustainability in relation to other sciences so that you have an idea, a general idea of where you would be getting into if you decide to enroll in our program. Then I will discuss how I see sustainability in the face of COVID-19 and climate change, which now is becoming even more evident than it ever was. And it's actually, in some respects, more scary than COVID-19. But also, even though it's more scary, it also gives us more opportunities to actually do the changes that we need to do. So there are many good ways of defining sustainability, and all are useful in a specific context. If you end up enrolling in our program, you shouldn't expect to be told what sustainability is. You will be asked to put together your own ideas and let them evolve as you try to solve different problems in different contexts and find your own definition, your own perspective about sustainability. In sustainability, you're not going to just listen to what others have said on the topic. You will be encouraged to find your own voice and express yourself loud and clear. And today is when all this starts. So I invite you to use the chat, as Bridget was saying, share whatever ideas you have in your head or in your heart about sustainability, and write them down and express them yourself. I really would like to hear from you now. Don't be concerned about trying to be smart or whether we are saying is correct or not. But I would really appreciate, and I will not start the presentation until I get some signs from on your side, right? Whatever you express has value, because you all have unique perspectives, and your perspective always counts. So please shoot your messages. I'll wait.
And as a heads up, Professor Manuel-Navarrete, we have students on the line that are interested in sustainability and history and philosophy, and so those perspectives with their questions may be coming through. And the students on the line are from the United States. Mm-hmm. So nice. I appreciate that you're asking for input in the chat, so please go ahead and ask a question.
I'll give you a few more seconds. just take into account that a career in sustainability, as I was saying, is not just about listening or memorizing, you know, repeating what others said or are saying, but learning to, we got something. Okay, so I'll just proceed, but please think about any questions that you know come up from my presentation, and hopefully we can have them, you know, discussed at the end. So from my own unique perspective, and we can flip to the next slide, please, Bridget. Sustainability is about learning how to live in this planet as if we were here to stay. What do I mean by that? This means learning to build and nurture mutually beneficial relationships between diverse components of the system, of any system. The more diverse the components of a system are, the more sustainable the system can become. But the more diversity, the harder it is to cultivate and maintain strong, mutually beneficial or reciprocal relationships. This is one of the sustainability problems in the US right now. This country is highly diverse, which is a really good thing, but it needs to invest way more into building reciprocity. Many people are finally getting this, although our leadership does not seem to get it quite yet, but they will get it. They will get there. Perhaps climate change will teach us that, right? So these mutually beneficial relationships occur naturally in ecosystems. This is a very important point. It is the normal. The dominant form of organization in nature is mutuality and reciprocity. Life is based on reciprocity, not competition. The problem is that for the last few hundred years, we have created a global society based on the false belief that competition is the most natural type of relationship. This false belief makes our society fundamentally unsustainable. So in summary, a main task of sustainability professionals is to help society to build, maintain, and cultivate reciprocal relationships between humans from diverse backgrounds, colors, cultures, etc., but also with themselves and with non-human beings. This is another very important point. Also between entities, like between cities, between governments, businesses, with the future generations, with the planet as a whole, with the mysterious aspects of being human and so on and so forth. It's very exciting because we have this huge potential that we're not realizing because we're focusing too much on competition. So how do we prepare students at ASU to do that? We teach sustainability competencies. First, systems thinking allows students to understand the complexity of mutually beneficial relationships and also how to create relationships between relationships, so networks of relationships. Then we need to think these relationships strategically, which is another competency, to ensure that they become and stay stable and mutually beneficial in the future and for the time being. Even more important, creating these reciprocal relationships cannot be an individual achievement. It requires interpersonal and intrapersonal competencies. Inter means between people, and intra means towards inside, to inward, which means that we have to learn to create these types of relationships for ourselves in our own lives before we can assist society to scale them up. So in sustainability, really, you will learn first to create these relationships in yourself and in your environment. And then once you have understood that, then you can scale it up or help to scale them up to the rest of society. As you can guess, a sustainability degree is not just about acquiring knowledge, as I said before, on how the world works, but also how to transform it for the better, which involves this personal commitment I'm talking about. So how does sustainability science compare to other sciences? Traditionally, science has looked at relationships between or within similar components to then establish what we know as disciplines that allow to break these limited similar components down even further. You know, so you first establish the boundaries for one component, and then you break it down further. You know, to find the essence about it, to analyze it and diagnose it. Next. Next slide, please. So sustainability instead focuses on understanding and fostering relationships between that which is different. So we are not trying to isolate similar components, but to relate components that apparently they look very different to each other. So, and traditionally science divides nature from humans. If you study biology, for instance, you will not deal much with humans. If you study sociology, you can forget probably about non-human beings or ecosystems. If you study engineering, you will focus on non-living things mostly. In sustainability, we mix all these things together, and that makes the field really exciting for me. Next, please. So let me use a metaphor for. I was showing this. You can see this picture of these people building this car and designing the car, and I'm going to use this as a metaphor to make clear what I mean by the difference between sustainability and other sciences. Traditional science would excel at creating disciplines to deal with the specific parts, as I said. In the specific parts, understanding the specific parts, the independent parts, it's very important to build a car, right? Instead, sustainability science would be more concerned about how cars interact with people, with societies, with the environment. Sustainability science would look at the big picture of cars in the world, and then would work with disciplinary scientists to include new design criteria and frameworks that ensure not just a better car, but how to build mutually beneficial relationships between cars and everything else in the planet. I hope that with this metaphor, it's clear what I mean. Can we move to the next now? Okay. So to conclude, sustainability focuses on relationships between people and the planet instead of looking at them as separate components of a system like a car, right? Can we go to the next? And with this, we start with the topic of COVID-19. And from a disciplinary perspective, COVID-19 can be defined as a health crisis. You have probably thought about COVID-19 as a health problem, a health issue, and it is a health issue. But this focus makes us just perceive the relationship between the virus and our bodies, and that's important, of course. But there are many other components or aspects of the virus, like for instance, the economic recession that is happening, which means that we instead focus on the relationships between saving lives versus saving money, right? That's a completely different problem that health doctors can say very almost nothing about, right? Well, they can say something as people, but not as doctors. Now, if we focus on the bigger picture and look at, we can see that COVID-19 is actually affecting our relationship with the planet and with other humans and with ourselves. And we can see how this pandemic is intimately related to other global challenges like climate change. The question from a sustainability perspective then is not about how to get rid of COVID-19, which is important, and medicine needs to deal with that, but to go back in a way that we don't have the old normality, but an improved normality. So the question for sustainability is how can we use this COVID-19 crisis as an opportunity to face the other challenges like climate change, like the mass extinction of species that we will need to deal with anyways. So it's clear now that there is no back to normal. I think that's obvious at this moment. And this might be a good thing in some way. It's an opportunity, considering that our normal was not only, but to a large extent, it was unsustainable, unhealthy, violent, often quite stupid. We used to do very stupid things that involve consumption of resources and decisions that were not helpful or that created a lot of inequalities, etc., and so on. So this is really an opportunity. Change, even if it's often or always painful, sometimes is needed, and I think this is one of these times. So the sustainability question in relation to COVID-19 is about how we can ensure that this crisis will, with all the pain that it generates, will not be wasted. Okay, so can we flip to the next slide? So would you agree that COVID-19 has already brought about a cognitive revolution, a mental earthquake, an internal revolution? You can see it perhaps in yourself, and this is perhaps triggering other changes around you. What do I mean by a cognitive revolution? We perceive our reality and the way our place in the world and ourselves very different now than 6 months ago. The expectations that we have changed. You know, the many things have changed at the cognitive level, at the level of perception. Even though out there things seem to be working, except for traveling and other things, seem to be working in a way that hasn't changed so much. So moving forward, one can think of two scenarios, and things can get worse, you know, than they were before, and that's a possibility that we have to take into account. Or things may get better, and then it means that we will have taken advantage of this crisis. Can we move to the next, please? So I'm going to argue that whether we go into moving better or into a better situation or into a worse situation will depend largely about how we deal with our fears. It's very key that we use this crisis to learn to micromanage our fears. I'm going to ask you, you know, how have you dealt with your own fears during the lockdown, right? Have you felt afraid in any way that was new? And this is important because one reason why crises tend to foster radical transformations is because they awake fear. Fear can be very productive when we are capable of embracing it and listening to it. We can learn a lot from confronting our own fears, but it can also lead to paralysis, even self-destruction. So it's very important that we manage well our fears. So next slide, please. So what I'm proposing is that what will determine the outcome of this crisis and also the climate change crisis is not so much what we do, what actions we take outwardly. These are important, but it's also important what we do inwardly. This crisis and sustainability professionals have to take that into consideration and help with that and link the inward with the outward. This crisis might go wasted if the political management of our fears by governments or by corporations is more effective than our own individual and collective capacities to deal with these fears and channel them towards self-transformations. We should not let others micromanage our emotions. This is a lesson, almost like an evolutionary lesson that we can learn from this crisis these crises that are so existential, right? The important point is that we can all work towards dealing with our own fears. So, you know, everyone has something to do. It's not something that governments are going to do for us. We have to, it's a job that every single person in the planet has to feel responsible for. And the job of sustainable design should be then to assist people in this process, to create the conditions so that people can deal with their own fears. So which fears I'm talking about and how do we deal with them? Obviously, this crisis brings the fear of death to the fore. Fear of death, you know, anyone can die from this virus, but I want to highlight another fear that is equally important, the fear of stopping. The fear of slowing down. Well, why are we so terrified at the prospect of slowing down? And yet, slowing down is precisely what we need to address the global environmental crisis that we have created. We have created this crisis partly because of our obsession with growth and with doing everything as quickly, as fast as possible, right? But does slowing down scare you? You know, when you all of a sudden were not able to perhaps travel by plane, was, you know, many people felt a sensation of losing something, of loss, and felt scared that some things were kind of changing in ways that they couldn't control, right? So to conclude this mini presentation, I will ask you, does this fear, the fear of slowing down, do you think that it comes from the fact that when one slows down, there is time to think, to reassess, to reconnect, to change course, to be with yourself, to inspect your thoughts and emotions deeply? And perhaps we are not used to do that. Perhaps our education system, or even the way we live, the lifestyles that we have, haven't prepared us to be with ourselves in this space of silence and a space of not movement. We're actually used to always escape silence, right? Create noise, so that, because silence is scary. It's not just by slowing down that we open up our radical possibilities for personal and social change. You know, there are many other things that need to happen, you know, outwardly, and governments have a role to play and everything. But the question is how to make the two movements go together. The outward movement of technological change, of political change, and the inward movements of personal changes. So I call this a slow revolution for sustainability. And I would like to know your thoughts about this.
There were a couple of fears listed in the chat box.
Awesome.
Yeah.
David, this is Colin. I'll jump in. My fear was, not being able to do enough work fast enough to help enough people to actually make a difference.
Yeah, that's a very common fear, because our culture is based on achievement, and we have built our identity around achieving, and it's all about effort, and there is never enough that you can achieve. The more you achieve, the more things are there to be achieved, right? And so it's very easy to fall into a cycle in which no matter how much effort you put into solving certain problems, the problems don't go away, right? Or they go away, but then there are other problems. So some problems need this sort of achievement, right? So some problems need that we dedicate a lot of effort to solve them. But other problems which are caused by ourselves, the problems that are not, coming from out there, like even the virus, well, it could come from out there, or we may have caused them, but climate change for sure, and many other problems that we cause by achieving other things require that we stop being high achievers. The other thing that happens is that when you want to achieve constantly, you end up being burnt out, right? So in a sense, the challenge here is to find like a balance between first what things need to be addressed from the perspective of achieving goals and outcomes, and what other things need to be addressed in terms of slowing down. Because when you slow down, the problem that we are causing through our movement slows down as well, or goes away, right? That's one challenge. Another challenge is to find the balance of a life balance, to not
Veed, we have a question in the chat. Can you please expand on how sustainability could be expanded during this time of COVID-19? What we could be doing right now?
Yeah, so as I said, this is a really great opportunity. For COVID-19 gives us the opportunity really to think about relationships. I define sustainability in terms of relationships. Now, right now we are in our houses, most of us, in quarantine, and I think it's important that we realize, or I think many people are realizing, the importance of face-to-face contacts and how important it is for us as social beings to build relationships that are not just online, you know, that are not just on our phones, that are not, because these relationships that we have through social media don't allow sometimes to give us enough depth in terms of getting to know the person, you know, see how they, when they talk, how they move, but also feel their bodies, their presence. This aspect, I think this is an opportunity for us to see the importance of that in our lives. And then when we go back, perhaps we won't spend as much time on our screens, and we will invest more into building meaningful relationships perhaps with family, perhaps with friends, perhaps it starts with our workmates. And then from there, we will learn also, hopefully, if sustainability professionals push forward in that direction, we will also learn to build more meaningful relationships with the plants, with the animals, with the planet as a whole, with all these beautiful aspects of reality. Because I think that if you conceive of sustainability as something you have to achieve, then you might miss this aspect that is not about achieving outcomes, it's about creating, building relationships, right?
So let me just ask if there's any follow-up to that, or if anyone else has any questions. You're usually traveling all over the world. Of course, it's harder to do that nowadays, but
yeah, that was my past, you know. I don't think I'm going to travel after feeling, you know, I feel more rooted now, you know, in this. That's something I learned from COVID-19. Many of the travels of the trips that I was doing, in retrospect, I realized they weren't necessary. So I don't think I'm going to travel as much.
okay. I unfortunately, as a study abroad instructor like you are, I understand that same. Yes.
Some travel is good.
Yes.
It's just a matter of assessing, you know, questioning yourself whether it's really meaningful or not. So to take some breath, you know, and make a better decision versus just rush the decisions.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I want to thank you so much for spending time with us and talking with us. And again, if you still have a question, you can unmute as we're wrapping up. Feel free to check in one more time. This is our contact information for myself and for Colin, and phone numbers for the College of Global Futures. You're welcome to just screenshot this and reach out at any time. And Professor Manuel-Navarrete, thank you. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Stay well.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining us, and have an amazing week. And we look forward to seeing you on more sessions.